Welcome to the Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival's October Virtual Vignette, the 9th overall in the series. Tonight's concert features Nathan Mondry, harpsichord, Marie Nadeau-Tremblay, violin, and Ryan Gallagher, viola da gamba. It was during their studies at McGill University that Marie, Nathan and Ryan united to create Les Barocudas. Born from a desire to combine creativity and humour with a high level of interpretation, Les Barocudas offers beautiful works of the Baroque era with a freshness that has become their signature, whether on stage or in their many online videos. Their debut album on the ATMA Classique label was released in 2020 and earned a 2021 Juno Award nomination by the Canadian Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences. Tonight we will view their recently recorded chamber performance with pieces by composers including Italian Jewish violinist Salomone Rossi, a transitional figure between the late Renaissance and early Baroque period, Dieterich Buxtehude, whose works for the organ represent a central part of the standard organ repertoire, and by Nathan Mondry himself. After the performance, Jennifer and I will moderate a live Q&A session with Nathan and Ryan. Please submit your questions using the YouTube chat feature. The cocktail for tonight, Plague Party, ties to Les Barocudas' Juno-nominated album entitled La Peste, a musical journey exploring the plague.
The first piece you heard was by Salomone Rossi, one of the few notable Jewish composers of the early Baroque. He worked alongside Claudio Monteverdi at the court of Mantua, although his exact cause of death is unknown. He was either killed by invading Austrian troops or succumbed to the plague shortly thereafter. Unlike the more typical 18th century trio sonata of Arcangelo Corelli with 2 treble instruments and basso continuo, the pieces in this program feature a treble and middle voice instrument, often as a violin and viola da gamba. The role of the gamba part in the Buxtehude sonatas is of a hybrid sort, sometimes ornamenting the bass line of the harpsichord, other times being an independent voice capable of playing notes higher than the violin. Although you will not hear the first or third movement, I can mention that my trio sonata is loosely programmatic. In this selection, musicians lament the death of their old master, hence the title. The program then takes a detour to the fortepiano, where a very ridiculous rondo follows an improvised prelude. The piano I play is a copy of a 1749 instrument by Gottfried Silbermann. Both instrument and instrument maker were well known by Johann Sebastian Bach, who sold these pianos for Silbermann towards the end of his life. The last piece is another Buxtehude trio sonata, not nearly as long as the G minor or ambitious in scale, though the ending is a real treat. We hope you've enjoyed the program, and thank you for tuning in.
There we are. Good. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Nathan. Hi, Ryan.
Hey.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and welcome everybody out there listening to that wonderful performance. Congratulations. It was marvelous. There was so much variety and sparkle and wit and articulation and pathos as well. And that we'll get to all of those things later. Really, thank you very, very much. And please pass on our congratulations to Marie as well.
Thank you.
Can't be with us. Really great. Bravo. Fantastic. I'm very glad to see you've got the viola da gamba in your arms there, Ryan, because I'm sure we'll be talking about that later. We already have a number of questions, which Jennifer here, by the way, I'm Paul Watkins. This is my wife, Jennifer. I'm the artistic director of the Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival, and Jennifer is the artistic advisor.
Director of Artistic Planning.
Director of Artistic Planning for the Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival. We are here hosting 2/3 of Les Barocudas, and we have a number of questions already. If you're still listening and you'd like to ask a question of Nathan or Ryan, please type your question into the YouTube chat feature. But I think without further ado, let's go to the many questions that we have.
Indeed.
Tell us what the first one is.
Well, our first question is from Lauren Smith, who is interested about, she asks, didn't Buxtehude influence Johann Sebastian Bach? The counterpoint is very similar. If so, would you know what Bach pieces were influenced by him?
The latter is maybe a bit harder to answer, but Bach very famously took he left the job for an extended period of time to go see Buxtehude play in Lübeck, and he famously went by foot, also on coach. But I mean, he like well overstayed his leave of absence and got in trouble for it.
He was quite famous for getting in trouble for things like that throughout his life, wasn't he?
True. Although he didn't get into a fight with anyone with this particular thing, at least.
No, that's true. In fact, I had the luxury of being able to look this up a little bit while you were playing, and to just add to Lauren's, you might know this, that. According to the internet, the Grove Internet Dictionary of everything, Bach was sort of influenced by. I think would it be fair to say that sort of trio sonatas, that kind of counterpoint, was an influence on. But I mean, Buxtehude was what, 40-something years Bach's senior. So, you know, he would have looked on him, you know, it was important enough for him to walk several hundred miles to.
I mean, Bach certainly knew some of his music. It was, especially the organ music was, you know, passed around by organists all throughout Germany.
Yeah.
Copies. So, yes.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing that I found out that Buxtehude wrote a series of 32 keyboard variations, which some people think may have been an inspiration for the Goldberg variations.
Could have been, yeah, absolutely.
It would work, wouldn't you know? Certainly. But you think Buxtehude would have not only played the organ, of course, he would have played all manner of keyboard instruments, I imagine.
Oh yeah, I mean, he definitely wrote. I mean, some of his pieces are harpsichord pieces, so
yeah,
you know that he played both.
I'm going to add a little question to that for Nathan, and we're going to get to you, Ryan. Don't worry, big time. I've got a lot of questions for you from my cello brain. But Nathan, do you play the organ as well? Have you been captured by that? Yeah, right.
In the first version of this program that we recorded, I played the pedal instrument that was sitting behind me. But because we did this program at a different pitch the second time, I couldn't use that instrument.
I see.
Okay.
I see. Yeah, yeah. What pitch were you using for that for the video that we just enjoyed?
That was at 440, I believe, A440.
Oh, that was at 440. Oh, okay, okay. Because that's often a misconception too. I mean, certainly one that I've fallen prey to myself. That everything from the Baroque period was flatter than the pitch that we're used to listening to. But Ryan, that's not always the case, is it? You tune to various pitches.
Oh, it can range quite a lot depending on the region and the types of instruments that the music would have been being written for. And a lot of this we know from studying either wind instruments that more or less remain at the pitch they were intended to be played at today. And presumably these instruments would have been tuned to the town organ, which I'm sure Nathan would be better able to speak about than me. But for Buxtehude, I believe the pitch would have been quite high.
Yeah, probably close to around a half step above modern pitch.
Yeah, this would be something like A is 465 hertz.
Wow.
More or less.
You know, some organs might have been 470, some might have been 460. It's you know, this was not a time of standards, so to speak.
And of course, with the viola da gamba, one could observe this in a lot of the northern German instruments, such as those built by the Thielke family. Gregorius Karp is another one. They're all quite small in size, so
and therefore a higher pitch. Yes.
Yeah, if to get for equivalent tension for two given sizes of instrument, the smaller would I think indicate for sure a higher intended pitch.
Interesting.
Indeed.
Well, I was going to ask, can you both talk to us a little bit about the evolution of your instruments, of the keyboard instruments and the viola, the gamba, and the cello?
This plays to a question. Actually, the next question, which I can see from our festival board chair, Michael Gehabe, who has also said wonderful playing, and said both inspirational yet soothing at this pandemic time. Can you provide insight into the evolutions of the, and this is, I've got to share this, a typo with you, evolutions of the perils instruments into our piano and cello. And then Michael corrects himself and says that's period instruments. But I think perils is almost if a computer can do a Freudian slip, it's done one, because given what we were just talking about all these local pitches, that is certainly one of the things. Well, maybe I could start with you, Ryan, in terms of tuning your various instruments, your violas da gamba and viols and bass violins and all sorts of other things. It is quite a perilous thing, isn't it? To be adjusting for pitch, and presumably that's one of the differences between the early iterations of the viola da gamba and then the cello, and modern instruments with perhaps more, well, it depends in whose hands they are, but perhaps with more secure intonation and all that sort of thing. How do you negotiate all of that?
Oh my goodness, it's such a long speech that you're talking about the early, what was it? The early.
I mean, I think our questioner, Michael, is interested in how the viola da gamba evolved into the modern cello.
Oh, okay. In relation to the modern cello, well, To answer that question, I should probably say that it's commonly understood that the viola da gamba is a sort of ancestor to the modern cello, which in a way it is, but in a way it's also more like a cousin to it. Meaning, if you were to view the violin and viola da gamba families as developing for a period of time somewhat concurrently, it's not until 18th century France, I would say, that we really start to see a historical linkage between the French viola da gamba school and the modern conservatory way of teaching the cello, and more specifically the method of holding the cello vertically between the legs and with the overhand bow grip and so on. Before that, the cello being the bass member of the violin family, sort of has a very it's sort of a lunatic and crazy varied history.
Yeah.
If you really go into the literature and scholarship about it, I think Mark van Skevik has written some of the most comprehensive articles nowadays about this subject, just on how many different sizes and ways of holding and playing the cello there might have been before we got to what we all know today. So in a way, the viola da gamba does have a role in that, even though long before any of this was happening, the viola da gamba has such a long history already.
Exactly.
It would take several books to explain it.
Well, sometimes people say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And one thing I'd love you to do, because you very kindly got your viola da gamba with you, could you show us the difference between the underhand and the overhand bow? Because during the video, your music stand was
Yeah.
in the way of your left hand. I think everybody would be really interested to explain what I do when I play the cello and what you do when you play the viola da gamba. I don't know if you're able to either move back or just lift the
Just
instrument
hold
up,
your
just to show us the
bow up.
difference.
Sure. Yeah. So like Paul is saying, the viola da gamba is played with an underhand bow grip, and if I were teaching this technique, I kind of like to teach that it's like shaking hands with somebody, and then the stick being supported by the index finger and the thumb to get this kind of balance going, leaves the middle finger, sometimes the ring finger, and even in the portrait of Buxtehude, he's using both the pinky and ring finger to manipulate the hair of the bow, which is different from what we all learn as young kid cello students. They're always like, never touch the hair.
Yeah,
I did not know that. Gosh, that's really interesting.
But on the viola da gamba, there's quite a lot of technique involved with the motion of pulling on the hair. Certain treatises and historical sources talk about it as being an extension of the hand and that it should feel like the player is scraping or scratching the string through the bow.
Interesting.
That goes back to the French, the famous French school of lute playing.
That's interesting. What you said there about the scraping and scratching, Ryan, and we could go on all night like this. I'd be absolutely fascinated. But it leads me to think about what Nathan might have to say about, to answer Michael's question again briefly. That it seems to me that Baroque musicians had a more tactile relationship with the string, and not, that Ryan's described how the hair is being touched, which you don't do these days as a modern player. Also from the harpsichord, where the string is plucked, to the fortepiano, where it's hit, and to the modern Steinway, where there's an incredibly complex mechanism. Just tell us a little bit about that and how it feels. Presumably you started as a kid, Nathan, as a on a modern piano. What drew you to the harpsichord, and why do you love the older instruments?
I mean, what I love about the older instruments is how different they often all are from each other. The different schools of instruments, how they're constructed, how they're painted, how the keyboards look. I'm right in front of my fortepiano, which I think could illustrate very interestingly sort of the transition from harpsichord to modern piano.
Fantastic.
Please,
yes, please
show
do.
us.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way that, like, if we're trying to understand like the evolution of a species, there isn't one missing link, there are many missing links that we don't always have the record of. This fortepiano is early on in the history of fortepiano. The piano was invented by this builder Cristofori, who invented probably around 1700. He started as a harpsichord builder. And, if you go to, there's this instrument museum in Leipzig where they have the original, there's a harpsichord and a piano that he built roughly around the same time. And they look exactly the same in the exterior, but the actions are different.
Interesting.
So I'm going to do a little shift here so that maybe you can see
fantastic
keyboard of the fortepiano here. One thing you'll notice, there aren't pedals like in a modern piano, but there are hand stops. So there's two knobs in the front, one on the right, one on the left. And if I put them both down, that's the equivalent of the right pedal. There is the una corda, which you have to move by hand as well. And you actually shift it. There's also two knobs in the back, which make it sound a little bit more like a harpsichord. Now, Gottfried Silbermann was an organ builder, and it's very likely that, he's thinking sort of like an organ builder when he added these little things to the basic model of Cristofori, which just had an una corda.
So you've got to be pretty agile. I mean, to change the sonority during a piece, was that maybe not so common? Did they just change it between movements, perhaps?
Probably more likely between movements. There might be certain passages where you could get away with doing it, but specifically the undamping of the registers. C.P. Bach is a treatise where he talks about that you're supposed to use for improvisations.
I see. I'm very good.
You're anticipating all of our questions.
Yeah, you're anticipating the next question. You're so eloquent, both of you. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm being a little bit rushed because we have
I think we're going to get in trouble if we go on for too long.
But this is so worth knowing about. And with the word improvisation.
Well, I think several of our viewers are very interested to know about your improvising, Nathan. And have you always been an improviser? How do you practice improvising? Is that something you do practice?
If you want to get better at it, you do have to practice. There are different ways to do it. It depends on what your goals are and especially in historical improvisation, there are pieces perhaps that you are modeling after. But I mean, the basic green vegetables that you have to eat, I would say, of improvising is, practicing sequences and cadences in different keys and linking them as much as possible.
Right.
That's interesting. I was going to ask Ryan too, because improvising is something that we think of. Well, I don't know. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. Something that I think of primarily is on keyboard instruments. From that time, the Bach and Handel and all the rest of them were great improvisers at the organ and at the keyboard. We're used to see. But of course, all kinds of instrumentalists would have to improvise too. What I'm interested in is presumably you guys in Les Barocudas improvise together as well sometimes. Were you improvising links in that program tonight? I thought I detected something, but I'm not sure. How do you anticipate where everybody's going to change harmony?
Well, I think in this particular program, I improvised most of the little links that you heard in pieces. But we, especially in those transitional kind of things, we just more or less agree that, okay, this is a passage where I can do a little noodle, a little whatever, and I was just going to say that my part is often only written as a bass line. There's no right hand.
Yeah.
So the cue for them is, I arrive on the bass note that they expect, and that's their cue that, okay, we're now in the written part of the piece.
Yeah.
I think too, Nathan, it's worth noting that it's likely that improvisation would have been so ingrained in this culture that a lot of the written compositions would have also had parts that were written to sound improvisatory. And if we're taking that from a very modernist face value, it's easy to get caught up in it, meaning you have to play obviously what's written. But as historical performers, I think there's a lot to learn from that, in that we can find new ways of interacting as an ensemble and sort of getting into the minds of the musicians and composers who would have been playing this music.
Absolutely. Well, I think I speak for everybody in that you all do that absolutely brilliantly, and it's been really such a pleasure to listen to all through the wonderful sort of pre-Bach nature, the Buxtehude, the CPE Bach, which is sort of revolutionary in a way, isn't it? In that fortepiano piece you played, some of it sounds extremely modern. You can really see how the period is reaching forward into the future there as well.
In the second half of the 18th century, CPE Bach was a far more famous composer than his father. And if you said the word Bach, most people would have assumed you were talking about CPE or JC Bach.
Right, sure. That's exactly that. How quickly the father was forgotten. Well, look.
I think we should probably wrap up. But one final question, if I may. Where did your ensemble get its name? Can you explain to everyone about that?
I feel like if Marie was here, this is her story to tell. But the short answer is we had a gig and we just had to come up with a name. So it just sort of was like a last minute thing.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot of things with us started as a joke. And just stuck that way. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what Marie was thinking of when she started.
Barocudas. Was there a post-concert seafood dinner or something?
No, but as you've seen with the logo, she made the logo, and
oh really?
And in the beginning, when there was potentially a fourth member, there was a picture that was showing a fourth Barracuda too.
I see. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So before we say goodbye to everybody this evening, I want to thank all the festival's benefactors and sponsors and donors for making another wonderful virtual vignette possible. Tonight's event was sponsored by Gail Mondry and Bruce Cohen. Thank you to you, and Carol and Howard Fine. We're very, very grateful for your generosity. Gail Mondry, yes, relation. And we welcome you to join us in continuing to support artists like Nathan Mondry, Ryan Gallagher, and Marie Tremblay by donating on our website, greatlakeschambermusic.org. Plans are also underway for the June 2022 Great Lakes Chamber Music Festival, which we expect and very much hope will include a full in-person festival from June the 11th to the 26th, combined with various online virtual experiences. It says on my script here that I could expand upon plans for the 2022 festival. Suffice it to say that plans are underway, and we've come up with a sort of overarching theme of the connection between music and nature, in fact, and there will be plenty of opportunity to explore things there. Certainly that was something that Baroque composers were very interested in indeed. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank Nathan and Ryan for joining us and chatting and explaining, as Tom Hitchman, I think, said, a really interesting description of your respective instruments. Just like to say thank you once again for a wonderful performance. Thanks for joining us. And we hope to see you again, and we hope at some point to see you live in Detroit for us too. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Thank you, Jennifer. It was a great evening.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Big pleasure.
Thank you.